Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm Paige. I'm an alcoholic. And where we're going to be picking up today is on page 69, very bottom full paragraph where it says, whatever our ideal turns out to be. So that's where we're kicking off. And for those that weren't here last week and who are like, wait, what are we talking about? Well, we're right smack dab in the middle of sex inventory, the last section of our fourth step. And just to do a very, I say brief, but I'm probably lying, a very brief review. I'll try not to lie. Let's talk about what those columns are and how we are formatting that inventory, because that's what we spoke about last week. And so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to set up our piece of paper. I always like to use this format because I've found it to be the most effective. And so what I'm going to do is in column 1, I'm going to put the name. Who did I hurt? Flip the page. Who did I hurt? Flip the page. Who did I hurt? Flip the page. And of course, yes, there's often some groupings or maybe some apps or that sort of thing, but we get them all down. And once I've gotten all of my column 1s done, what I want to do is I want to look at where was I at fault? Where did I cause harm? And if I'm struggling to see where that was, it can be helpful to look at where I was at fault before the relationship or the situationship or the hookup, during and after. And even if that's difficult, with many of our romantic relationships and the exes, they made their way onto our resentment inventory. So we can take a lot of the information that we wrote in our resentment inventory and put it right into column 2. Because we want to look at where we caused harm, where we did what we shouldn't have done, or we didn't do what we should have done. And I like to work column 2 and column 3 together. So we write column 2 and then we pop right over to column 3. And I look for, where was I selfish? Where was I dishonest? Where was I inconsiderate? Not was I. So let's just assume I was and have a look for where. And what that does is that helps us to take this inventory just that much deeper, to help us see the truth about who we are and where we are and how we're showing up in this area of our life. And then in column 3, we look at did we, now the word is unjustifiably aroused, jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness. Did we unfairly create jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness? And did I create that in myself? Maybe because I was super insecure, just anxious and holding on, or did I cheat and I was projecting my infidelity on others? Or did I create it in the other person? And so that could be if we were unfaithful, all the ways that we cause harm, maybe tried to make them jealous, tried to make them insecure. We can also look at, did I cause harm to a third party? For example, if I was engaging with somebody who was married, I hurt their spouse. And everyone's like, but what if they didn't know? I always like to say, if they were to find out, would they feel these things? If yes, write them down. And then what I want to do is I want to pray. And before I get into, so I get all my column 2s and 3s done, and I get all of that done, and then I head to column 4. Now, before I do any column 4, I want to pray. And so the prayer is also a direction, but we're going to use it as a prayer. God, and I'm Canadian, so I'm going to throw in a please. God, please mold my ideals and help me to live up to them, because that is what we are trying to do. Now, column 4 is where we laser beam focus in on what should I have done instead? What should I have done? And so I can take, where I was selfish, I should have been selfless. Dishonest, honest, inconsiderate, considerate. The opposite of creating jealousy, suspicion, or bitterness is building love, trust, connection, communication over time. And so we take that and we flip it in column 2 and in column 3. And from that fourth column, that is where we get our sane and sound sex ideal. And that is part of the point. There's a couple points of why we're doing sex inventory. The first point is because that's where all the guilt and shame tends to live. That's where many of us carry those deep, dark secrets. That guilt, that shame, that's where we have the biggest capacity to harm others. This is also where, spoilers, where I'm going to be getting a whole bunch of amends that I need to make from. but I need an ideal. I need a vision for who I need to be before, during, and after my relationships, because I can't figure it out on my own. It is not intuitive for somebody like me. I know it is for you guys. You just do swimmingly in all your relationships. But for somebody like me, I need inventory. So when it says whatever our ideal turns out to be, that is what we're talking about, that sex ideal. Now, one of the things, and I keyed it up so I'd remember to do it, and I'd send it in right there, boom. One of the things I popped in the chat is, if you're still feeling a little like unsure about like what goes where, what does it look like? Well, I created an example document, and I did it with voice to text because that's how I live my life. So there's probably typos, but I did my best to not have typos. And it's some examples. It's a PDF document of some examples of things we can put in column 2, we can put in column 3, and some examples of what that fourth column can look like. And I just wanted to put that in the chat, and if I get reminded, I'll put it in the WhatsApp groups after, but I would need to be reminded because that's how this little brain works. Not consistently. I have issues with attention. I know, I'm shocked, as I'm sure everyone else is. All right. So when we talk about whatever our ideal turns out to be, that is the purpose of these 4 columns. One of the purposes, but a main purpose is to cultivate, to create the sane, sound ideal for who I need to be before, during, and after my relationships. And again, I spoke about this last week, but it's going to be, spoilers, a little like a resume. What I do not mean is do not print it off and hand it out like a resume or put it on your dating profile. I mean, or do, you do you. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm not the arbiter of anyone's sex conduct. But what I mean by that is as we, grow and change, our resume will grow and change. And as we grow and change, our sex ideal is hopefully growing and changing. The sex ideal about who I need to be when I'm single is going to be a little bit different than when I'm in a relationship, and maybe a little bit different when I've been in a relationship a couple of years. Maybe we're living together. It's going to be a little bit different than if we're, married or have kids or have grandkids, like all of that. And it's meant to grow and change based not just on the nature of the relationship, but hopefully I'm living up to some of these things and they become a foregone conclusion. And I know that you guys would absolutely never have a disagreement with your spouse. Just unheard of. But one of the things when we talk about utilizing the 10th step, these columns can be so helpful after we've done our resentment inventory, because we're going to be resentful at our spouse first. But then taking it through these columns, not you guys always happy marriage, happy life, or what have you. But these columns help us to refine and grow and develop our ideal. And I speak about this when I work with sponsees and I receive their 5th step. I write from that 4th column what I hear their sex inventory or their sex ideal is, so they can't say they don't got one. So when it says, whatever our ideal turns out to be, we must be willing to grow toward it. So the ideal is this place of growth. And I spoke about this quite a lot last week, but we're doing review all over the place, so let's review it up. There is no power in an ideal. Many of us had many ideals that we could not live up to. The power that I need is in God. Higher power, the creator, the spirit of the universe. That's where the power is. So if I'm trying to be like, I'm going to be kind, considerate, patient, and loving. That's an example of something that shows up in a sex ideal. I can't on my own power do that. Well, I can for a little bit. But man, when you've left the toilet seat up or not picked up your socks or, those sorts of things, like, that's when it gets a little bit difficult. And so what we do is and when I said that prayer, we ask God to mold our ideals and help us to live up to them. That is a prayer, and it is also a direction. So what we do is we take what we wrote for our sex ideal, which comes again from that 4th column, what I should have done instead. And I can write that out as a prayer. And I can pray those on a daily basis. I can take those ideals and I can meditate with them. I can sit in meditation and breathe with them and move with them. And this sex ideal work then becomes incredibly dynamic, rather than a static, piece of paper I got on my shelf. Oh yeah, I should have one of those. It's something we move with, something we grow towards, something that becomes incredibly spiritual. And I know I've only made it a sentence into what we're supposed to be reading today. Who would have thought? But one of the things too is when I work with sponsees, when we're just doing our first ever 4-step, we just focus on our romantic relationships, our sex conduct. That's what we're looking at. But if there is ever any area of your life that you are finding especially difficult, I know nobody here ever struggles with their finances. That's not a thing. But what we can do is we can take the various elements of for example, let's say we struggle with finances. I know I'm speaking to nobody here, but we can take our finances through the sex inventory columns. Now, again, I don't have people do this on their first ever 4-step. This is something we kind of do as we continue to grow and seek. And so I can look at how I spend money. I can look at credit cards. I could look at borrowing money. I could look at debt, and I can take those things through the sex inventory columns, and what emerges is a financial ideal that I can take to prayer and meditation. And I know everybody gets along with their in-laws. Everybody here's got the best in-laws. But if you're struggling with, let's say, your in-laws, or you're feeling like you're falling short as a parent, that's every parent, by the way. Any good parent is probably feeling like they're falling short, just as a heads up. Again, I can take those sorts of relationships through the sex inventory columns to create a parent ideal, to create an in-law ideal, to create a work ideal, to create an ideal in these areas of our life that we are struggling. Again, you don't have to. The book doesn't say to do that, but I've done that with sponsees. I've done that in my life, and it has been incredibly helpful. So again, these things that we can take to prayer, to meditation, that we get to move with. And again, if you're like, girl, you're just making stuff up. Yes and no. So let's go see what it says. It says, we must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. So just as we saw in our resentments, a lot of the people that we were like resentful towards, it was like, wait a minute, I hurt them. And I hurt them first. Oh man, I gotta make an amends there. We will find that in a lot of our sex inventory, it will illuminate the amends. And part of why I'm so big on being very thorough, especially in the 4th column of resentments, and being so thorough is because if I do this thoroughly, I can take not all of, but I can take a lot of what I already wrote into the amends. And that just is saving work. So I'm just here for efficiency. It's okay if you're like, I'm not here for this. That's okay too. But it goes on to say, we must be willing to make amends where we have done harm, provided that we do not bring about still more harm in so doing. So we, of course, approach amends with a sponsor, with somebody to guide us, and to be considerate of not causing harm to somebody else. Now, there's where I live in the world, there's it's usually with the guys that are like, I can't make amends to any of my exes. Doing any of that would cause harm. And I'll just let you know, unless there's a restraining order, probably not. We can approach amends with tact, with common sense, with respect. We can approach them in that way. And it goes on to say, in other words, we treat sex as we would any other problem. Wait a minute, this is how we deal with problems. This is how we deal with these in Alcoholics Anonymous. It says in meditation. Oh man, I gotta meditate. I gotta have a daily meditation practice. Oh man, yep. But now we got an idea. We got something we can meditate with if you want. And a lot of what this is pointing to is actually two-way prayer. I'll talk about it here in a sec. In meditation, we ask, and any time in this book it says we ask, what that is a prayer. So we ask God what we should do in each specific matter. And that is a prayer. So I don't know if you're highlighting prayers in different colors. Some people like to do it in pink. Get your pink out if you want. You don't have to. But that is a prayer. And it resembles, those directions resemble what the Oxford group did as they had a daily meditative practice that we talk about as two-way prayer. And in two-way prayer, essentially what they would do is they would ask a question, like, what should I do about this situation? Or how should I handle this problem? And then what they would do is they would do some spiritual reading, and they would come to a place of stillness, a place of openness, a place of receptivity. And they would write what came to mind. They would write, starting with a term of endearment, like my dear, my love, my beloved, and they would write what came to mind. And then they would spend some time just sitting in the presence of their higher power. And then what they would do is they would take the things they wrote down and run it by some people or by the four absolutes. And the idea is this suggestion absolutely, so the four absolutes were absolute love, absolute unselfishness, absolute honesty, and absolute purity. Hold on, we'll talk about purity, where it's like, wait a minute, this is supposed to be sex inventory. What do you mean absolute purity? No, hold on. So we would ask, is the direction that I might have gotten in two-way prayer absolutely loving? Is it absolutely honest? Is it absolutely unselfish? And are my motives absolutely pure? And here's the thing, even if you're not getting information from God, if it lines up with those sorts of things, it's probably a better decision to make than otherwise. And it says the right answer will come if we want it. Now that is important. I gotta want the right answer. Listen, I will tell you, there have been times I have avoided doing two-way prayer because I was afraid of what the answer would be and I didn't want it. But what I love about this paragraph is a little microcosm for what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. We do inventory. We make amends. If we're struggling, we turn to prayer. We turn to meditation. And we seek that answer, and it's a beautiful microcosm for how we practice these principles in all our affairs. When we talk about the principles, for me, the principles are the tangible actions, and we're seeing that at the bottom of page 69 here, the tangible actions that I get to take. And this is how we live this way of life. So very, very bottom of page 69, it says, God alone can judge our sex situation. So God alone is the judge. And in my brain just now, I was thinking about Judge Judy. And to be fair, I don't know if I want her judging. And this is also why it's helpful to have a loving conception of God. And to be fair, we start where we start. But what we will experience is no shade on Judge Judy, but I'm just saying, she's a little strict, a little harsh at times. But what we get to experience is a loving, caring, accepting, forgiving, this open, expansive higher power. That's what I get to experience if I do this work. That's literally been my lived experience and the experience of the people that I work with. Because often my vision of God or my idea of God tells me more about me than it does about God. If I'm struggling with a judgmental God, it often parallels to the judgment that I'm struggling with. If I'm struggling with a punishing God, I'm often struggling with myself being punishing or the fear of punishment from others. And it can give me a lens into where there is still room for growth. Oh man, it's almost like spiritual growth is the name of the game here, you guys. Wild. So, God alone, not Judge Judy, can judge our sex situations. Counsel with other persons is often desirable. It can be helpful to run these things by each other. And again, the context of this part of the book is, we're not going to extremes. It says, but we let God be the final judge. God is who gets to, God, higher power, the creator, the spirit of the universe. That is who is directing us and leading us in this area of our life. And it says we realize that some people are as fanatical about sex as others are loose. So no pepper or all pepper, you know what I mean? And so we are trying to avoid that. No worries. So glad you're here. Don't worry about it. So it says, We avoid hysterical thinking or advice. And again, what we were speaking about so much last week was how beautiful and refreshing the sex inventory and the directions around sex truly are. Because this is a book published in 1939. And I'll be honest, I would have expected it to be like bad. It's bad and you're bad. And if you think about it, wrong. Don't enjoy it. And then the joke is think about baseball, but have you seen some of those baseball players, little cutie patooties? That's got a whole other, so like that's not a solution. And it's not that. We're finding this God-given, which is really just a sane and normal ideal for this area of our life, which is, hey, let's stop hurting people. Let's make sure we're operating with care and consideration, and we're not operating out of shame and self-hatred. That's really what we're talking about. And it's interesting because some of the origins of these ideas are from the Oxford group, which was religious. And you might think, oh man, it's religious. I bet they were like, hey, no fun. Don't do it. But there's this book. It's called The 8 Points of the Oxford Group, and it talks about the steps, and they weren't laid out as steps at that point in history, but it talks about the ideas that became the steps. And it was talking about the sin of lust, and those aren't words that I would use to describe it, but it was describing that idea that the real problem is that we do not treat people as God's children. We're putting what they can do for us ahead of their inherent divine worth and goodness. And we're not treating them with that love and care that they deserve, that respect. And I was like, that is refreshing as heck. So like, I'm just throwing that out there. Because I know when we get to this part of the book, it's like, oh no, you want me to look at what? So we're avoiding hysterical thinking or advice. Now this is a beautiful example of the book meeting us where we're at and taking us where we need to go. And I point these out because we are not expected to be perfect in Alcoholics Anonymous. It does not demand perfection. In fact, it expects that, guess what? We're going to be human and we're going to be fallible and we're going to make mistakes and we're going to get it wrong. That's why we have steps 10 and 11 and 12, because we will make mistakes. And so the book is going to meet us where we're at and then take us where we need to go. It says, suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. So let's say we act in a way that we know we shouldn't have. And by the way, like that sex ideal stuff, it's often not like anything radical. You usually have a gut feeling when you know you're doing something you shouldn't, right? But it says, suppose we fall short of the chosen ideal and stumble. Suppose we don't live up to that. Suppose we cause harm in this area of our life. Does this mean we are going to get drunk? Some people tell us so. But this is only a half-truth. It depends on us and our motives. Now, I'll tell you something. A lot of times in AA, we talk about our motives, but I don't know if we always talk about them in the right place. We talk about our motives before, like, oh, I want to check my motives before making the amends, or I want to check my motives before service, or working with the sponsee. I'm like, man, the power of the steps will overcome my terrible motives if I take the action. You know what I mean? Like if I'm showing up to an amends with terrible motives, I will get humbled, not humiliated, but like if I'm willing to make that amends, I will grow and I will change. But there are a couple of places, this being one of them, where we are asked to really have a look at our motives, which is something we never do before we get into a relationship, before doing that. It's like, check my motives in that. No, I could never. But that's what we're talking about. It depends on us and our motives. If we are sorry for what we have done, so we see that we've caused harm, we have that remorse, and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things. And that part is important. It is God, the higher power, the creator, the spirit of the universe. That is what is taking me to better things. And that is why I'm taking this ideal to prayer. That's why I'm taking it to meditation. That's why I'm continuing to, make amends and live this way of life, because the power isn't here. The power is in God, and I get to allow it to flow through me. So it says, if we're sorry for what we have done and have the honest desire to let God take us to better things, we believe we will be forgiven, and will have learned our lesson. And then what comes is a warning. If we are not sorry, so if I don't have remorse, it's like, I'm just hurting people, and our conduct continues to harm others, we are quite sure to drink. We are not theorizing. These are facts out of our experience. This is a fact, not a theory, not a maybe. It is our lived experience. And I think we've all seen those people who maybe get into a relationship with somebody they shouldn't. Getting into a relationship with somebody maybe new in the program, which is detrimental to that newcomer. But it is also detrimental to the person who's engaging in that behavior. Often those people don't stay sober. So if I am harming others, and I'm not growing, and I'm not changing, I'm not making amends, I will drink again. That is the warning, and it is a stark warning. But it is also not out of the blue. Because if I understand alcoholism as it is defined in this book, alcoholism has two symptoms. The first symptom is the allergy of the body, that once I start to drink, I cannot stop. I cannot control the amount once I start every single time. And what that means is I cross these lines in the sand, and I do these things I said I would never do, and I hurt people in ways I never wanted to hurt people, and I scrape myself up off the bathroom floor, and I say that I'm never going to do it again. And the second part of my illness is the obsession of the mind. And it is the sober thought that I have that takes me back again and again and again to the first drink. And if I have this illness, I know what it is like to say I'm never going to drink again, only to do it again and do it again and do it again. And try to put things between me and that first drink and it not work. And I relapse again and again and again. And so it is a continuation of the first step promise. It is a continuation of the first step experience. If I don't have a spiritual awakening, I will drink again. And so that's what we're talking about. But because this is also an area where people struggle, it's put as clearly and plainly as it is in this direct warning. And I think it's because it's that human nature to be like, it has nothing to do with my alcoholism, it's fine, right? Not that you guys would ever minimize any sort of behavior. I know I have. And so that's what we're looking at. We're looking to experience the reality of our predicament and to be taken to that place of freedom. Now it says to sum up about sex. So we're summarizing the inventory that we've done. It says we earnestly pray for the right ideal, for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and the strength to do the right thing. And that is something that's a direction and a prayer. So we earnestly pray. That is to pray. So God, higher power, creator, the spirit of the universe, I pray for the right ideal. I pray for guidance in each questionable situation, for sanity and strength to do the right thing. Because I often don't have my strength, and I need God's strength. And I don't just mean about not cheating or stuff like that. Man, I need the spirit that animates the universe to get me to set a reasonable boundary and communicate my feelings. Do you know what I mean? That's the sort of person I am. Not even, that's so kind. So this one is on every Wednesday. I do other ones. So I do one on Monday and Friday and one later on Wednesday. Rob will put the info in the chat. We got you. So that is the prayer. And this power that I get to access allows me to show up as the best version of myself in this area of my life and in my relationships. And guess what? That is who I wanted to be the whole time. In the third step, that fear, I'm going to take these steps and I'm just going to be the hole in the donut. You know what I mean? Who will I be without these things? Who I will be is who God wants me to be, which is not different than who I want to be. I think some of us, myself included, has that fear of like, God wants me to like be miserable and unhappy. And that's not our experience. We are sure that God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. And so who do we get to be? Who we always wanted to be. But I wasn't able to live up to that person. So it says, if sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. And again, this is a direction that we don't just need to use only for this area of our life. But if sex is troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into carrying this message to others, sponsoring others, taking them through the work. Not people that we are attracted to, though. It doesn't say that because it doesn't need to, but I'm just saying, like, it is really helpful to just add that caveat. No, I'm throwing myself into helping others. What a cutie, like, no, not them. Others, So we throw ourselves into helping others. And again, part of why I love looking at this part of the book is because it's this beautiful microcosm of how we live these 12 steps. I write inventory if there's a struggle. Now, it doesn't tell me take it to somebody. It's going to tell us to do that in the 5th step. That's what we're prepping for. And that's what we do in the 10th step. But I take inventory to another person. I make amends if I have caused harm. I pray. I meditate. I help others. That's what this thing is. That's what we're doing. And that's this little microcosm, which is hidden in a part of the book that, let's be honest, most of us are like, oh, I don't really want to read. It's a little uncomfy. Oh, when you're at a meeting and you get to this part in the book and it's like, oh, nobody likes it when one of the old timers is reading out it. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. I love it when anyone reads it. I love it. Alrighty. So it says, if sex is very troublesome, we throw ourselves the harder into helping others. We think of their needs and work for them. Thinking of others. This is not a selfish program. This is a getting connected with God and helping others program. And think of their needs. If they have alcoholism, what is the need? Is a spiritual experience. So I'm going to try my best to take them through these 12 steps. And it says, this takes us out of ourselves. And I need to be taken out of myself desperately, in part because what is killing me is that bondage of self that I pray to be free of in the 3rd step. And when I'm wrapped up in the bondage of self, man, I'm not okay. And I need to be free of that. And it says, it quiets the imperious urge when to yield would mean heartache. And now it's a race to see, am I going to get the definition before Rob? I might. So imperious means overbearing or that urgent, that almost uncontrollable. I shouldn't do a race with Rob in the middle of the big book study. That's not nice. He normally wins. That's why I was making that joke. And I was, but that's what imperious means. So that like overbearing, domineering, urgent, that like overpowering urge when to yield would mean heartache. Hey, yeah, he's on it. Oh, it's not a race. So that's what we're doing. We're leaning in. And when we lean in, we get taken to freedom. So now what we're doing is we are summarizing the work that we've done so far. There's some stuff that's a little promisey in here, but we're summarizing the work that we've done so far. And my dear friend Babe, I'm pretty sure it's Babe because Terry, I stole it from Terry, who I'm pretty sure stole it from Babe. So Babe talks about that this is a book of mirrors. And what I want to do is, if I've written all this inventory, I want to hold up this part of the book to my experience. Is this my experience? And I get to rock and roll with it like a little checklist. Have I done this? Have I done this? So if we have been thorough about our personal inventory, we have written down a lot. So there's not a page requirement. I'm spelt differently. It's got an I right in the middle because I'm self-centered. But there's not a page requirement or paragraphs like you'd have in like a university essay or high school essay or that sort of thing. But if I want to know of have I been fearless and thorough, have I written down a lot. And I will say, when I work with people, it is a bit of a point of pride when we get through a whole pen. You know, it's like, yeah, I killed the pen. I got through that pen. Yeah, it's kind of a cool little thing. People are less excited when they get through a notebook, though, because they're like, look at what you made me do. You know, I didn't make you. All of this is consensual. Nobody is forced to do anything, but look what you made me do. So if I'm wondering, have I been fearless? Have I been thorough? Did I write down a lot? Do I got a bit of a hand cramp? Did I kill a pen? You know, did I do that? And then it says, we have listed and analyzed our resentments. Check, check. I listed them in resentments, column 1. I began to analyze them in column 2 and column 3, and then I got to the real analysis. Oh, yeah, that is a common experience, never killing a pen in our life. Absolutely. That is a common thing until we get to inventory. It's a magical moment. And it's okay for those that are like, I don't feel like it's a magical moment. That's okay too. I promise you it is. So we have listed and analyzed our resentments. And so the real analysis that we got to is in the 4th column of resentments, where I saw the things that I had done. And it says, we have begun to comprehend their futility and fatality. Did I comprehend? Did I begin to understand? Or am I beginning to understand the futility, which Rob beat me on that one? Uselessness, purposelessness. Yeah, he won. The pointlessness of trying to hold on to a resentment. And when it talks about the fatality, that holding on to a resentment, it's what cuts me off from this power more than anything else. Do I see that? Again, I get to use this as a little checkbox. Yes, did I? Is this my experience? And it says, we have commenced, and I love that word. That's okay, Kate. I'll send you, I know where you live. I'll send you a couple pens. Oh, I love the shenanigans. Oh, I think I've sent you pens before, actually. I think I have. Yeah, there's no excuses if you're working with me. You're going to get Amazon some pens, but I will get you nice ones. Because I'm big on, if I'm going to write inventory, I don't want to write inventory with one that I got to, scribble on. Or if anyone knows the lighter trick where your pen's not running and you just, give it a quick bick, and it gets it going again. No, okay, that's just me. I would never burn pens. It's cool. Alrighty, so so it says, we have begun to see their terrible destructiveness. Is that my experience? Have I begun to see how destructive, how damaging it is to hold on to and to have these resentments? And presumably, if we've killed a couple of pens, we should have. And it says, we have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. Have I had that experience? And this is what I like to call the 4th column experience, where I'm beginning to have that softening. And where I begin to look at them as a sick person is on the page 67 prayer, the resentment prayer. And I pray to see them as a sick person and to show them the same pity, patience, and tolerance that I would cheerfully grant a sick person, and to show up in that way. And I begin to have that softening, and I begin to turn and to switch. And as I write that 4th column of what are my mistakes, where I have been at fault, where I was selfish, dishonest, inconsiderate, or selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and afraid. And I begin to see the truth about myself. And those resentments begin to soften. Is that my experience? And I spoke about that word commenced, because that word commence means to begin. I don't stop here. I continue. These 12 steps, they really are a way of life. I continue to grow and to seek, and yet there'll be some more inventory, and that's okay too. And it says, so we have begun to learn tolerance, patience, and goodwill toward all men, even our enemies, for we look on them as sick people. We have listed the people we have hurt by our conduct. And I did that in resentments. And I did that in sex conduct. and are willing to straighten out the past if we can. And to be fair, that willing doesn't have to look like, oh boy, I can't wait to make amends. That sounds like a whole lot of fun. No, that willingness can look like, oh God, I don't want to, but I will. That's what willingness looks like. Yeah, that's what it looks like. We don't have to be like chipper to be willing. And so this is just summarizing the work we've done so far. Now, there are people who use that last line as a bounce off to maybe do a whole other harms to others section. I don't do that because we're gonna catch any strays. We'll catch anyone that we missed in the 8th step. But what I will say is, if how I write inventory, which I showed how it comes out of the book, if it is a little different than how you write inventory, guess what? You're not going to get drunk. It's okay. It's okay. Don't freak out. So it goes on to say, in this book, you read again and again that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves. And you'll notice one of the patterns we have in this book is that faith without works is dead. And what that means is belief that there could be a power greater than myself, belief that these 12 steps could help, belief that there could be a spiritual awakening, belief that my sponsor isn't lying to me. That belief, without me taking the actions of the 12 steps, is dead. What that means is I can believe in this thing, but if I don't take the actions, I won't get the results. That's what it means when we say faith without works is dead. And so when it says that faith did for us what we could not do for ourselves, what we're talking about is this power that we are beginning to and I'm big on a relational view. You don't have to be, but I'm building a relationship with. I'm beginning to connect to. I'm beginning to experience this. This is doing for me what I could not do for myself. And if you've written inventory and you look at your inventory and who you are after, I can't stay there, but man, I've begun to see things in a whole new way. I began to see the world and myself and beginning to show up in a whole new way. I could not overcome my resentments on my own. Your girl, she ruminates. I'm a ruminate. You play the tape. I'm playing that whole tape and the highlight reels and the, director's commentary about what they did to me. I can't overcome resentments on my own. And again, that rumination, that doesn't stop with resentments. Oh, my fears. Oh, I will just play out all the scenarios. And guess what? It doesn't help. It doesn't work. And again, when we look at our sex inventory, these are areas where we struggle, and it's like, I can't do it on my own, but we're beginning to change as the result of this power. So it says, we hope you are convinced now that God can remove. And I emphasize this because it is God, higher power, the creator, the spirit of the universe. That is what is doing the removing. What we're doing in 4 through 9 in step 4, we're beginning to identify the things in us that are blocking us from this power. Beginning to identify those. And in step 5, that's going to be even more illuminated. And in step 6, I'm going to become willing for them to go. In step 7, and then through the work in 8 and 9, they begin to leave. And that's what we're talking about. So it is God that does the removing. That God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him. And that's what we're trying to do. 4 through 9 is to get unplugged. It's a spiritual plunger, so that we can have this power flow through us. That's what we're trying to do. And so it says, if you have made a decision, that is step 3. Have I done this? So step 3, and an inventory of your grosser handicaps, that's step 4. Now, your guys' is not that gross. Mine, pretty gross. I'm just kidding. Gross. So if I've made a decision, step 3, and an inventory of, the egregious, we see these things. That's step 4. You have made a good beginning. Oh, man. Beginning? What do you mean? I got to do more? Oh, gosh, I hope I hope that whole chapter that we're going to talk about next week isn't like all action focused or something, like into action, you know? And so it says, that being so it's a beginning. This is a way of life. I can't stop at step 4. In fact, it's incredibly painful to stop at step 4, just as a little warning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself. So how do I know that I've really done well in a 4th step? Not that it's a pass-fail thing, but how do I know that I've been fearless and searching and thorough? Again, I get to hold this up as a mirror. Did I have to swallow and digest some big chunks of truth about myself? Did I see some things where it's like, ugh, yeah, that's me. I did that. And so that is a beginning. And next week we're going to dive into action. Oh, man. And so we'll talk all about step 5, and we'll do that for a couple weeks because it takes me a while. So with that, I'll wrap up, and it's over to you, Neil. I hope your sports team is winning.